How's it going, guys? I'm back with another one. Today we're gonna be doing some Q&A questions. I get a lot of those in real life, not too much in comments, but I get some. But if you guys want to ask something, I'll do my best to get back to you guys to respond, or maybe I might even do a video respond because that's a little bit easier for me. But yeah, sometimes I get a lot of questions about how do I know if the car I'm buying is good, or is it gonna last, or all this stuff. It's kind of hard to tell without physically being in front of the car, but I could give you quite some pointers. If you guys want anything European, stuff like that, you have the funds, go right ahead, buy whatever you want. It's gonna break down, guaranteed. More work for us or stuff, but yeah, if you just want a car to get you from A to B, Honda, Toyota are probably the best choices. Something that's not, I want to say, too new, not too old. Oldest would probably be 2010, I want to say. The newest probably like a 17 and down. That's kind of the sweet spot right now. Yeah, there's still a lot of old cars, working and stuff like that. But if you want to get a car and not put too much money into it right away, I want to say these are the golden years right now. Maybe 2005 or something, but you are gonna expect like have some leaks at least. You are gonna have some wear and tear. Yeah, you're gonna have stuff like that. But if you're gonna be driving where you're just driving 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or less, pretty much any car that's decent, is not dripping or overheating, should get you there, back and forth. But if you're trying to do long trips, an hour drive, a different state, stuff like that, it has to be pretty good. It has to be freeway worthy and stuff like that. So you gotta have somebody check it out, make sure you don't have nothing, breaking off, leaking massively, overheating problems. That's a big one. But yeah, if you just want a car to get to work and back, and maybe it's a drive down 30 minutes, 20 minutes, any car that seems decent, as in not overheating, doesn't really have any misfire codes or stuff like that, or transmission problems, you should be fine. How can you tell if they have problems? I mean, unless you can kind of get yourself a tester, OBD2 tester, just kind of, everything's online now. So if you check out some videos or something about the common problems, or where to kind of look and see, pretty much like a flashlight, and your visual could determine, car, how it's good, it works, and stuff like that. But until you actually take it to a professional, they'll tell you, hey, this seems good or bad, because there's a lot of people that do tricks to make sure the car can at least get down 30 minutes or whatever down the road before it breaks down, so you could buy it and now it's your problem and stuff like that. So be wary about that. There's a lot of that going on. In the month I get at least 3 or 5 people that come in that just bought a car, something's really wrong with it. They did some miracle jobs, some Disneyland tricks, Mickey Mouse. But yeah, so that's that. I'll say that. So American cars, Ford, Chevys, and stuff like that, if it's a front wheel drive, kind of garbage. But again, you see them down the road all the time. It doesn't mean that it's going to break down right away or anything, but eventually it is going to come down. All cars, doesn't matter. Even the new ones now, there's a bunch of stuff going on with them. Try to stay with those Asians, cars, Toyota, Hondas, not Kia or Hyundai. They're horrible. But yeah, so those years are pretty good. Low mileage. What's too high? Try to be like 150 and down. That's that's probably the highest I'll say. Anywhere close to the 100,000, you still got pretty good life on them. Anything over 150 or close to 150, expect some wear. Like some leaks, wear and tear, plastics. If a car has a lot of plastics on them, I'm pretty sure it's gonna have problems. A lot of the newer cars, a lot of stuff are made out of plastic, so 4 years already old, it already has problems. Alright, the other things are like when I should be doing the tune-ups or maintenance on the car. So there's a lot of confusion on that, or at least the customers that I get here or over the phone, where they want a tune-up, but in reality they just want like an oil change, or they think they're asking for oil change. I don't know what's going on, but I always like to ask what exactly if they're looking for. If they're looking for the full tune-up, which is spark plugs, filters, oils, cleaning and reprogramming, stuff like that for the newer cars, valve cleaning or stuff like that. So, or if you just want a regular oil change, which you should be doing, I recommend from 3,000 miles, no more than 6,000 miles, depending what oil you get, what brand. You know, a cheaper brand, I would say every 3,000 miles. I know it sounds like a short distance, but if you really want to keep your engine clean inside and make sure you have the right lubrication and stuff like that in there for the wear and tear, 3,000 is pretty sweet spot. I do it for my cars at 3,000, so no more than 6,000. Especially for these newer engines or moderate engines, I would say a lot of the problems they're having is oil related problems. So if you don't take care of that oil, which is simple, you will get those bigger problems down the line, you know, with low mileage and stuff like that. So that's the sweet spot, 3,000 to 6,000. You could do the middle, 4,000, 4,500, whatever you know, but I wouldn't recommend more than that, especially if you have like a Kia or a Hyundai, 3,000 miles. Okay, because they always, that's the first thing they have going on. And yeah, like your spark plugs, stuff like that, they're usually rated for 80,000 miles. They're rated for 80,000 miles or 100,000 miles, but depends how the car has been driven and all the gunk that's in there. Sometimes, you know, they don't get up to that lifespan. So if you change your spark plugs, how fast should you be changing them afterwards? Depends if you're driving. So if you're doing 100,000 every, what is it, like 5 years or whatever people drive nowadays, you know, change them. But I would say if you're just getting a new car, have somebody check them out so you can see the lifespan of them. You know, usually when people sell their cars, they don't change these type of things because they don't want to, you know, waste that money for that. They let the new owner take care of it or whatever. So that filters, air filters, it's good if you could change them every oil change, but every other oil change is fine. Unless you live where it's a lot of dust, ranches or stuff like that, change them every oil change. It's gonna be doing your car big favor. So other stuff, I get asked a lot, the brake fluid and power steering fluid, all that stuff. Yes, it is important to have it cleaned, but I feel like that's also like something that it's easier for the shops to kind of get going, so to prevent other future damages and stuff like that. Because brake fluid, if it's really dirty, it's eventually going to clog up the lines. It becomes gunky and stuff like that, and the efficiency of the temperature, all that stuff. They say you're going like downhill, that fluid gets pretty hot, you know. So you want to make sure you have fairly good fluid in there. Not, you know, it doesn't have to be the cleanest, but it does work to keep everything up to date. What that looks like, once a year, no more than 2, I would say, so you won't start getting gunked up. Because once you leave it for years, multiple years, and you try to clean it, it takes too much. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to get new fluid in there, because once you put it in there, it starts mixing with the old gunky brake fluid that's in there, and it turns into like in the middle color. So, you know, try to keep up with that. And also, it also helps out to see if there's a leak. If you're low on fluid, those type of fluids don't just evaporate or anything like that. It has a leak, you know, or your brake pads are low. So if you see your brake fluid reservoir and it looks low, either you have low brake pads or you have a leak somewhere. Same thing for the power steering. Power steering it should be always on the minimum mark, or, you know, max and min. If it's low, it's most likely you have a leak somewhere. So nowadays the newer cars have the electric power steering, so they don't have no more fluids, so you don't have to worry about that. You have to worry about more expensive repairs, like the motor or the racket pinion, which is all electric, and more money for that, and reprogramming. So it's different steps, but now you don't have to do that. Coolant, same thing. You want to make sure the coolant doesn't get too old in there, so it doesn't create gunk and stuff like that. Because now for the newer cars or like moderate cars, those fluids help lubricate other parts, you know, like the thermostat that's opening and closing. Make sure it doesn't get gunked up. Make sure you don't have cloggage in your cooling system, which will affect the heating performance, you know. But you have to have like gunk up, you know what I mean? It's a little bit of gunk will eventually turn bigger, but that's why you get them flushed, you get them cleaned out and stuff like that. It also helps you know how your parts are, you know, see if you got a leak somewhere, see if the hoses are, you know, still have that elastic rubber feel to it. If they feel like wood, or like hard plastic, they're done. That also helps out, but you know, it's something that's in the medium range. It's not something where it's like you have to do it unless the car's been sitting, you know, nobody's done it for 10 years, 5 years, then yes, of course you want to get those things done. All right, so this is what I was kind of talking about the leaks. You see how this one has cracking here, and I guess the original owner, they just put a stop leak on there, try to gunk it up in there, try to stop the leak. But you know, this is the guy that was trying to drive over here like 30 minutes out to get to me to see where the leak is, but he didn't make it. He got, you know, stuck in the freeway. But yeah, this is what I'm talking about, you know, like these type of things, once it heats up, what he must have drove it for what, like 10 minutes, didn't make it, you know what I mean? So depending on how bad the cooling leak is, you won't, you know, the car starts overheating, so you will have to stop every 5 minutes to, you know, or just get the tow truck. That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter how, you know, low it is. Or, and when he went to go check out the car, it wasn't even leaking. So this happens after you start driving it, it starts creating pressure, and then, you know, it leaks it out. So that's what I'm talking about. The other thing we have too is the brakes. You know, how do you know? You gotta look at them. You have to have somebody. Sometimes it's the easiest thing to take out the tire, you know, see the thickness of the pad and stuff like that. There are tools to there are tools. All right, I have everything. You know, and the thickness of the pad. Let me see here. Do I have one for display? Oh, I do have one. So look, this is the brake pad. This is the life of the pad. This one. This is the back plate of it. So this does not count as life for the brake pads. Let's see right here. So you can see it. Nope, that's not green no more. It's a little bit more. We're in the yellow range. See that? That's yellow. That's the first stages. This is, I would say, halfway. But this is just a demonstration. This one actually, it's like 80% or like 60%, in between, somewhere. They don't have too much life in the ones in the back, so that's why it looks like that. But yeah, you get yourself an idea. So you know, when you get to stuff like this and you're like, oh shit, you know, I got a fucking 3 papers left of brake pads, you know, stuff like that. That's important to know. Or if you have, like, you do your brake pads and you just change the pads and you still hear the sounds, the squeaking and stuff like that, it's probably the material or the rotor or just the change in climate. You know, sometimes when it's really hot and then you get to cold and stuff, you guys gotta understand that it's metal, you know. So it's, or not fully metal, but there's friction in, you know, between. So not necessarily because your brakes are making noise that you need brakes, but you might need an adjustment, you know, stuff like that. Make sure all the pins are lubricated, make sure that there's no serious crystallization on the pad or the rotor, you know, so stuff like that can be checked out. But that's also important when you get in the car. Check out the brakes. You want to stop. There's no scarier feeling than not stopping the car. Another thing we get is also asked, how do I know my suspension is good or my tires are good? It might not be as straightforward as you think, but it's pretty, once you get the feel of cars and stuff like that, you get to know when your suspension is pretty bad. So a good one that I like to do, like the test, is go over a bump. Go over those humps they have, like the speed bumps and stuff like that. Don't go fast. I'm just saying maybe like 10 miles an hour or something like that. Don't try to jump over the bump. And then just kind of see what your car does. Like if it does like a high suction, like that, like loud, I'm talking about loud, it could be moderate, it could be low, that's fine. But if it's doing too much, or you feel like a boat action, like a wave, most likely your suspension, like your shocks and stuff like that, is bad. If you hear cracking or hard thumps, it could be your control arms, bushings and stuff like that. Or if you see, just like you go over the bump and your steering wheel just like starts shaking, you can't control it, that's a good sign that your suspension is pretty bad. Another thing, your car wobbles, you know, when you're going a certain speed. It could be at 20, it could be at 35. I remember I had a bad tire one time and I only do it at 55. And it would start shaking the car. Once I got to 60, it would be smooth. So I was like, what, you know, what's going on? I had a bump in my tire. So check your tires. It might look good sometimes, but until you actually get the whole feel of the tire, you won't be really able to feel, you know what I mean? Or sometimes you have to get the tire off or lift up the car and spin the tire and just kind of look at the outline and see that everything's nice and smooth. If you see like, you know, some movement or even like a huge bump or like kind of like my knuckle right here, that's enough for the tire to be bad and have you that, you know, that bad feeling. Or even when sometimes when you're driving and you're good, you're going like maybe 20, 25, whatever, and the steering wheel is just like, it just kicks sometimes. Every time the bump hits the road, you'll feel that. And the good indication is that it's in the front, the steering wheel will move. If you feel it on the car and your steering wheel doesn't move, but your car is moving, most likely in the back. That's just a little tip right there. If you're turning and you hear a click, click, click on it, especially the speed that you're going, if you're going a slow speed as you're turning, it's a slow click, here's your axles. If you're going kind of fast and the speed is with the clicking, like click, 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 as you're turning, that speed then is your axles, something around there, you know, those little CV joints and stuff like that inside, they're worn out, so you got to get those done. But yeah, so, and then suspension and tires is good to know how they are, especially if you're driving freeways, things like that, because it could get scary. You know, higher speeds and stuff like that, you could cause an accident, your life, other people's lives. It could get, you know, pretty risky. So I would say if you're trying to buy a car and you know you have to use freeways to get to point A to point B, make sure all those stuff are in order. You know, you have pretty good tires, your suspension is, you know, 80%, you know, anything 50% and under, I would say get it fixed, or try to take the roads. Don't force the car, you know what I mean? It's not worth it. Have somebody checked out and see how it looks, you know? If it's something that you could ride on for a couple of months, perfect, you know. But if it's something that's falling off, it's already broken, bushings ripped, you can't afford it, don't take high speeds, you know. Take the streets, wake up, like my dad said, you know, he used to tell me, I'd be like, hey dad, there's somebody behind us, they're trying to rush us. He would say, hey, if this motherfucker was such in a rush, he should have woken up at 2 in the morning and just started coming, you know, so he wouldn't be rushing everybody. But you know, yeah, so it's just either take more time to get to where you're going at slower speeds, but until you can fix it, you know, I wouldn't, or don't drive it, you know. If you're doing short distances, even if you have bad suspension, I've seen people just go like that. I'm not saying do it, but people do it all the time, and it's risky, but it's short distances, you know, down the street to the market, coming back. And then sometimes, you know, that's where your ball joints and stuff like that get broken, because when you're going into a driveway, you force it and it just rips off, and you know, so that's always a problem too. So suspension is pretty important on the car too as well. Going back to the leaks and stuff like that, how important are they? Pretty important. If it's a coolant leak or your antifreeze and stuff like that for overheating, super important. That could mess up your engine if you overheat it too much. Some engines don't take it very lightly. One time or just a little bit could be enough. You'll reduce the lifespan, you know, so maybe you won't have any problems there. A couple months, couple weeks later, boom, you find something related to your overheating because you had a leak, didn't take care of it, now you have engine problems. Same thing for oil. Oil leaks, it can vary. If you have a big oil leak, where I'm talking about, you can see that drop like a second or every 5 seconds, or anything that has to do with seconds, it will run out pretty quick, believe me. So also that, you know, apart from contaminating the floor and your parking space and risking your engine, or even fire, I've only seen that or heard about that once, where the valve covers were leaking pretty bad. It was a V6, so exhaust manifolds on the side, it was just leaking and leaking. And I believe the lady took a trip to Sacramento or something like that, something far. And halfway, she told us that the car just started smoking really bad and it just caught on fire, you know. So I've only heard about that once, but you know, one time is enough. One time is enough. So also brake fluid is pretty flammable once it gets pretty hot. So there's a lot of flammable stuff in there. So if it's leaking pretty bad, or if it's like years of gunk, sometimes it's pretty expensive to fix a leak. But that's the thing. That's why you want to catch them when they're barely starting, fix them, or see what you have to do. If it's like better to do like a whole combo where you fix all the leaks so you won't get, because the thing is that you fix the leak, you stop that pressure loss, and then the one that was small gets slightly bigger because there's no pressure loss over it. Now everything's on this end, and that's how you get like, hey, we fixed this side, but why is it leaking now more from the other side? Like, what did you do? We didn't do anything. We just fixed the pressure loss. Now it's leaking more from there, you know. So that's why it's better to kind of get the whole picture and see how much the whole thing will cost, rather than just doing a half job, or you know, or if it's just very small and you're like, hey, you know, I'll take care of this down the line, months down the line, then that's fine. But as long as you get that understanding that that's what you're gonna have to do at the end. Coolant leaks are pretty important. Obviously brake fluid is important. Everything is kind of more important, you know. Everything is pretty important on leaks and stuff like that, but it's just how bad they are, you know. So if they're horrible or they're pretty aggressive leaks, try to get them as soon as possible, you know. Tow it in. Sometimes the cars don't make it. You know, we just had a Lexus, one of my good customers, he bought, and they told him it was just a small leak. He was on his way to come drop it off, like a 30-minute drive or something. Didn't make it. You know, he had to tow it. Because customer, I waited for him after hours. I was like, hey, no problem, you know, I'll wait for you. Sometimes you have to just tow it in. You don't want to risk that. A lot of cars won't take that beating. So yeah, leaks are important. And also your transmission fluid, things like that. Some of these cars you have to see when it's recommended, but for Nissans, newer Nissans and stuff like that with the CVT transmission, I recommend every 20,000 miles. This is based on how frequent these transmissions get bad. You know, they go bad and stuff like that, and people don't do the service. I've gotten new transmissions from the dealership, and I shit you not, there's a piece of paper, orange, red, like highlighted paper that says change, you know, the oil every 20,000 miles, 25,000 miles, something like that. It used to be higher, but then I noticed that they started bringing it down and down, lower mileage and stuff like that. So if you have a CVT Nissan transmission, believe me, 20,000 miles. If it's not that one, I recommend 60,000 miles, 80,000 miles, something like that. Don't try to push the car to 100,000 miles without, you know, because once you get to that point and you change it out, something funny happens to that transmission fluid. It becomes, I forgot the word that it's called, but that old fluid is keeping the transmission from working. You take out that old fluid, it's much gunkier, it's more thicker. You put that new thin fluid in there. That fluid, the new one, it does something to the clutches where it's too strong or something, and it starts deteriorating the clutches, something like that, if I remember correctly. And not instantly, obviously, but it will affect it, you know, because that old fluid was kind of keeping it alive in there. So the myth is kind of real. If you change your transmission fluid when it's been really old, it might cause some problems, but it all depends on how it's been driven, how many miles. There's a lot of factors to it. But my recommendation is, if take it to somewhere where they can check it, or if not, if you could do it yourself, take out a little bit of fluid and get something where it's like white, or you can see the background in it. If you see too many shavings, too many debris in there, most likely you have, you know, something going on. So instead of like a full flush, I'll recommend oil that comes out, which is like about 5 quarts or less on most transmissions. Switch it out with new, you know. So usually a transmission can take up to like 8 to 12 or 14 quarts depending on the transmission. So if only, when you take out the bolt and only 5 or 4 comes out, just top it off with those and just kind of run it, you know, get a feel for it, break it in. You know, don't do no high accelerations, just drive the car normal for a couple miles and then switch it out again, you know, and then ease it into there. That's my recommendation. I wouldn't, if you haven't done it fluid for, you know, you don't know when it's been done or it's never been done, and you have 150, 160,000 miles and you're trying to do the oil change for the transmission, it's a little risky. But yeah, just try to take out a sample or try to do a half and half and break it in like that, so it won't, you know, feel anything. You won't feel any kicks or anything like that. And especially if you're starting to feel the kicks or you're starting to feel slippage and you change the fluid, sometimes I feel like you notice it more, or one or two things happens. It gets fixed, it doesn't kick anymore, or you can feel the kicks more. And that's how you know that there's problems inside, or a solenoid could be failing or something like that. But always try to get it checked out. So yeah, that's some of the short things that I get asked a lot, or a lot of common questions. So if you guys want to hear anything else, or if I can help you out with something, subscribe, comment, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can.